A billionaire's bodyguard retired after 30 years. His replacement was a single mother on her first day. She had no executive protection experience, no corporate security background, just 8 years in the United States Army and hands that had held a rifle in Afghanistan. Then, at 2:47 on her first afternoon, she did something that 12 trained security personnel standing 10 feet away could not. She stepped in front of a bullet. What happened in the next 90 seconds would either make her a hero or leave her 7-year-old daughter an orphan. 6 hours earlier, Kiara Washington was standing in a studio apartment in the Bronx, ironing a black suit on a board that doubled as her kitchen counter. The apartment was small enough that you could see every corner of it from the front door. A fold-out bed pushed against the wall, a refrigerator with more magnets than food inside, a bathroom so narrow you had to turn sideways to close the door, and on the kitchen table a backpack with a patch sewn over a tear in the front pocket sitting next to a bowl of cereal that was mostly milk because the box was almost empty. Amara was 7. She sat cross-legged on the fold-out bed, watching her mother press the steam iron over the suit jacket with the kind of focus most people save for surgery. "Mama, are you going to protect a real billionaire?" Kiara smiled without looking up. "That is the plan, baby." "Is he nice?" "I do not know yet. I will find out today." "What if he is mean?" "Then I will protect him anyway. That is what the job is." Amara thought about this for a moment. The way 7-year-olds think about things. Completely and without compromise. "Mama, what if somebody tries to hurt him, and you have to fight? Then I fight." "What if you get hurt, Kiara? Set the iron down." She looked at her daughter, those wide brown eyes that carried every question the world had ever invented. She walked over, knelt down, and held Amara's face in both hands. "Listen to me. I am coming home tonight. I am coming home every night. That is not a maybe. That is a promise." Okay, Mama." Kiara went back to the ironing board. She finished the jacket, hung it on the bathroom door, and looked at herself in the mirror above the sink. The suit was new but cheap. She had bought it 3 days ago from a clearance rack, $42. The shoes were from a thrift store on Fordham Road. Black leather scuffed at the toe but polished until they almost looked like they cost something. And there, just above the collar line visible, only when she turned her right shoulder toward the mirror, was the scar, a raised line of tissue about 4 inches long, running from the top of her shoulder blade down toward her arm. Shrapnel. Kandahar Province. 8 years ago. The last time Kiara had worn a suit this pressed, it was her husband's funeral. She stared at her reflection for a long time, not with vanity, not with doubt, with the quiet, careful assessment of a woman who had learned to measure herself not by what she had, but by what she had survived. She got Amara dressed, checked her backpack, made sure her homework folder was inside, walked her down the hall to apartment 412, where Odessa Harding was already waiting with the door open. Odessa was 71, retired postal worker, the kind of neighbor who had become family not through blood, but through showing up. She had watched Amara 3 days a week for the past 2 years, never asked for $1, never once made Kiara feel like she owed her anything. "You look sharp," Odessa said, looking Kiara up and down. "I feel like I am about to throw up. That means you care. Go on. She will be fine." Kiara bent down and kissed Amara on the forehead. "Be good for Miss Odessa." "I am always good." Kiara laughed. She squeezed her daughter's hand, held it for 1 second longer than usual. Then she let go. She walked down 4 flights of stairs because the elevator had been broken since March. She pushed through the front door of the building and stepped into the early morning cold of a Bronx street that smelled like exhaust and bread from the bakery on the corner. She stood on the sidewalk, took 1 deep breath, then another. And for the first time in 3 years, Kiara Washington felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel. Not just survival, not just getting through the day. Something that sat deeper in her chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope. She was starting over. She had no idea what she was starting. Stay with me, because what happens next will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about who gets to be a hero. Kiara Washington had learned to fight long before she ever joined the Army. She grew up in West Baltimore. Not the Baltimore they put in travel magazines. The Baltimore where you learned which blocks to avoid by the time you were 8. Where gunshots at night were so common that the sound stopped waking you up. Where the fastest way out was either a basketball scholarship, a prison sentence, or a recruiter's office. Her mother, Denise, worked the night shift as a nurse's aide at a care facility across town. She left the house at 9 every evening and came home at 7 every morning, smelling like disinfectant and exhaustion. Kiara's father had walked out when she was 6. No goodbye. No forwarding address. Just an empty closet and a gap in the family portrait that never got filled. Denise raised Kiara alone. Worked double shifts so her daughter could go to a school with a metal detector that actually worked. Told her every single night before she left for work, "You are going to be something, Kiara. You are going to be something this neighborhood has never seen." Kiara believed her. She had to. At 18, the day after graduation, Kiara walked into a United States Army recruiting office and signed her name on the line. Not because she loved the flag, not because of some patriotic calling she felt in her bones. She signed because the recruiter promised her 3 meals a day, a paycheck job training, and a way out of a zip code that had taken too many people she knew. And that is a reality that does not get talked about enough. Every year, thousands of young people from low-income neighborhoods, many of them black and brown, walk into those same recruiting offices for the same reason. Not for glory, for survival. The military becomes the exit door that society never built for them. Kiara thrived. She was strong. She was fast. She was disciplined in the way that only someone raised by a single mother working doubles can be. She finished basic training near the top of her class and was assigned to the Military Police Corps. Within 2 years, she had been selected for a close protection unit stationed in Afghanistan. Her job was to guard high-value personnel, generals, diplomats, intelligence officers. She learned how to scan a room in 3 seconds, how to spot a concealed weapon from across a crowded market, how to position her body between a threat and the person she was protecting without thinking, without hesitating, without asking permission. It was in Afghanistan that she met Darnell Washington. He was an engineer in the same forward operating base. Quiet, steady, the kind of man who fixed things with his hands and said more with his silence than most people said with speeches. They fell in love the way people fall in love in war zones. Quickly, completely. With the understanding that tomorrow was never guaranteed, they married on a 2-week leave in Maryland. A small ceremony. Denise cried the entire time. 14 months later, Darnell was on a convoy route outside Kabul when an improvised explosive device detonated under the second vehicle in his column. Kiara was 3 weeks pregnant when the notification officers knocked on her door. She finished her deployment, gave birth to Amara at Walter Reed, received her honorable discharge with a Purple Heart, a combat action badge, and a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder that the VA said they would help her manage, but never quite did. She came home to a country that thanked her for her service, but could not find her a job. For 3 years, Kiara worked as an overnight security guard at a Target in the Bronx. She drove Uber during the day when Odessa could watch Amara. She sent out applications to every private security firm she could find. Corporate protection, executive detail, risk assessment consulting. Every one of them came back with the same answer. "We are looking for candidates with commercial experience. Thank you for your service." She had survived Kandahar. She had survived widowhood. She had survived 3 years of rejection letters and 4 a.m. alarm clocks and a daughter who asked every morning why they could not have a house with a yard. But nothing had prepared her for what was about to happen. Then one morning her phone rang. The call came at 6:14 on a Tuesday. Kiara was sitting on the edge of the fold-out bed, lacing up her boots for another Uber shift when a number she did not recognize flashed across her screen. She almost let it ring. Scam calls were half her call log these days. But something made her pick up. Kiara Washington, who is asking? "My name is Deshawn Carter. I served with a close protection unit out of Bagram." Not the same rotation as you, but the same unit. I got your name from the Veterans Network. Kiara sat up straighter. Okay, I am listening, Deshawn explained. He had spent 30 years as the personal bodyguard for a man named Lamar Jackson, the tech billionaire. Clean Energy, the one who had been in the news for refusing to sell his company to Vantage Energy. Deshawn was retiring. His body was telling him it was time. Bad knees, bad back. 30 years of standing between a man and the world will do that. Lamar does not want a security firm, Deshawn said. He does not want a team of suits with earpieces who rotate every 6 months and do not know his coffee order. He wants one person, someone he can trust, someone with instincts that were built in real situations, not simulations. That is why I am calling you. Kiara was quiet for a moment. Then she said what was true. I have not done close protection in 5 years. I am a single mom. I have a 7-year-old daughter. I cannot take risks anymore. Deshawn's response came without hesitation. That is exactly why I called you. A mother protecting someone is the most dangerous kind of protector there is. You do not just react, you anticipate, because you already know what it is like to lose someone you love. You know what that costs, and you will do whatever it takes to make sure it does not happen again. Kiara looked across the room. Amara was asleep, her arm hanging off the fold-out bed, her stuffed elephant tucked under her chin. What would I have to do? Deshawn told her about the screening process. A physical assessment, a tactical scenario evaluation, a psychological interview. 4 candidates total. All veterans, all qualified. Kiara would not be getting special treatment. She would have to earn it. She earned it. She scored highest among the 4 on every single evaluation. Tactical awareness, threat response time, situational judgment. The psychologist noted that Kiara displayed an unusually high level of environmental sensitivity, the ability to read a room before the room reads you, the kind of skill you cannot teach in a classroom, the kind that comes from years of training and years of surviving things that should have broken you but did not. Deshawn called her 2 days later. The job is yours if you want it. You start Monday. Kiara sat in the quiet of her apartment. She looked at the stack of rejection letters on her kitchen counter. She looked at Amara's patched backpack. She looked at the suit she had bought for $42 that she had been saving for the right interview. Monday, she said, I will be there. She hung up the phone. She did not cry. She did not celebrate. She sat very still and let the weight of the moment settle into her bones. Then she picked up the phone again and called Odessa. I need you to watch Amara on Monday. Kiara had no idea what she was walking into. And neither did Lamar Jackson. The estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, sat at the end of a private road that wound through 2 miles of maple trees, so tall they turned the afternoon sky into a cathedral ceiling of green and gold. The driveway alone was longer than the entire block Kiara lived on in the Bronx. Lamar Jackson had built this house 12 years ago when his company first crossed the billion-dollar mark, 22 rooms. A library with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a private lake, a home gym that cost more than most homes, a kitchen designed by an architect from Milan who had never once asked what anything cost. And it was empty. Beautifully, expensively, devastatingly empty. Lamar was 58 years old. He had made his fortune in clean energy, solar, wind, battery storage. He had started the company in a rented office in Southside Chicago with $40,000 he had borrowed from his mother, a postal worker, and his father, a city bus driver, who had taken out a second mortgage on their house because their son told them he could change the way America powered itself, and he had. His company was now worth $11 billion. It employed over 8,000 people. It had built solar farms in 14 states and wind installations in 6 countries. Lamar Jackson was, by any measure, one of the most successful self-made businessmen in America. He was also one of the loneliest. His wife Gloria had died of ovarian cancer 5 years ago. The disease had taken her in 11 months. Fast. Merciless. Lamar had spent those 11 months doing everything money could do. The best oncologists. Experimental treatments. A private room at Memorial Sloan Kettering that looked like a hotel suite. None of it mattered. Gloria died on a Tuesday afternoon in October, while Lamar held her hand and begged to God he was not sure he believed in to give him 5 more minutes. He never got them. His son Kendrick was 28. He lived in London, worked in finance, called on holidays. Sometimes, the distance between them was not just geographic. It was the kind of distance that builds when a father spends 30 years building an empire and looks up one day to find that the person he was building it for has stopped waiting. And now there was Vantage Energy. Vantage was one of the largest fossil fuel conglomerates in the world. They had been trying to acquire Lamar's company for 2 years. Friendly offers at first, then less friendly, then legal pressure, then board manipulation. Lamar had refused every time. The clean energy industry was in the middle of a war most people never saw. On one side, companies like Lamar's building the infrastructure for a future that did not run on oil. On the other, fossil fuel interests that saw that future as an existential threat to their profits. And when trillions of dollars are at stake, some people will do things that do not show up in the business section of the newspaper. There had been threats, vague at first. Emails that could have been from disgruntled competitors or random internet noise. Then, more specific, a letter sent to the company's headquarters mentioning Lamar by name and the route he took to his office every morning. Deshawn had handled all of it. For 30 years, Deshawn had been the wall between Lamar and anything that could hurt him. But Deshawn was 61 now. His knees were shot. His doctor had told him point blank that his body could not sustain the physical demands of close protection any longer. And so here was Lamar, sitting in his study at 10 o'clock at night, a glass of bourbon he had barely touched, a photograph of Gloria on the bookshelf behind him, and on his desk a personnel file. He opened it, read it again. A photograph of a woman with sharp eyes and close-cropped hair stared back at him. Kiara Washington, age 34. Army veteran, military police, close protection unit Afghanistan, Purple Heart recipient, single mother. A 34-year-old single mother, Lamar said to the empty room. An Army vet who has been driving Uber for 3 years. This is supposed to protect me. He closed the file, leaned back in his chair, looked at the photograph of Gloria. Deshawn trusts her, he said quietly. And I trust Deshawn. He finished his bourbon, turned off the desk lamp, walked through the 22 rooms of his silent house to a bedroom he had slept in alone for 5 years. Somewhere in the Bronx, Kiara Washington was ironing a $42 suit and promising her daughter she would come home. Neither of them knew that in less than 24 hours, one of them would be bleeding on the floor of a Manhattan hotel and the other would be holding her hand, begging her to stay alive. The day before Kiara's first shift, Deshawn Carter asked her to meet him at a diner on Grand Concourse in the Bronx. Not a fancy place. Cracked vinyl booths and coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. The kind of place where nobody looked up when you walked in. Deshawn was already sitting in the back booth when Kiara arrived. He was a big man, 6'3", broad shoulders, hands like catcher's mitts. But there was a stillness to him that had nothing to do with size. It was the stillness of a man who had spent 30 years watching everything and reacting to almost nothing. On the table in front of him sat a small leather notebook, brown, worn soft at the edges, pages thick with handwriting. "Sit down," he said. Kiara sat. Deshawn pushed the notebook toward her, but he kept his hand on it. "Before I give you this, I need to tell you 3 things. These are not suggestions. These are the rules that kept Lamar Jackson alive for 30 years. You forget them, somebody dies. Maybe him. Maybe you." Kiara nodded. "Number 1. The threat you see is never the real threat. Everybody thinks protection is about spotting the guy with the gun. It is not. The guy with the gun is the end of the story. Your job is to read the beginning, the person who does not belong, the bag that nobody claimed, the car that drove past the same block 3 times, the man in the crowd who is not clapping when everyone else is clapping. You watch for the thing that is almost normal, but not quite, because that is where danger lives. Not in the obvious, in the almost. He let that settle. Number 2. You protect the principle, not your ego. This is not the movies. You are not there to fight. You are not there to look tough. You are there to get your person out alive. That means sometimes you run. Sometimes you cover and evacuate. Sometimes you put your body between a bullet and a man, and you do not think about it because thinking takes too long. Your ego will tell you to stand and fight. Your training has to tell you to move. Kiara thought about the tactical scenarios she had run in Afghanistan, how every instinct screamed to engage, and how the best operators were the ones who got the package out clean, not the ones who stayed to prove a point. Number 3. Read the room before the room reads you. When you walk into a space, you have about 4 seconds before people start forming opinions about you. In those 4 seconds, you need to have already identified every exit, every potential threat, and every person who does not feel right. You read the energy of a room the way a musician reads a song. You feel the tempo. You feel when something is off key. And you act before the wrong note becomes a disaster. Deshaun lifted his hand off the notebook and slid it across the table to Kiara. Everything I learned in 30 years is in this book. Routes I planned. Threats I assessed, mistakes I made, lessons that cost me sleep and nearly cost me worse. It is all in there. He paused, but the most important thing is not written down. He placed his hand flat against his own chest. It is here. You protect someone because you care about them, not because there is a paycheck, not because it is a job, because you look at that person and you think, I am not going to let anything happen to you. That is the only thing that makes you fast enough when it matters. Kiara took the notebook. It was heavier than it looked. Or maybe it just felt that way because of what it carried. Deshaun stood up. He reached across the table and shook her hand. His grip was firm, but not competitive. The handshake of a man who had nothing left to prove. Take care of him, Deshaun said. He is more fragile than he looks. Then he walked out of the diner. And Kiara sat there alone with a cup of bad coffee and a notebook full of 30 years of someone else's life, wondering if she was ready to start writing her own chapter. What does it really mean to protect someone? And how far would you go to do it? If you are already invested in Kiara's story, you are going to want to see what happens next. Subscribe now and turn on notifications because this journey is just getting started. Monday morning, 5:45 a.m. Kiara pulled her 12-year-old Honda onto the Merritt Parkway, heading north out of the city. The sun was not up yet. The highway was mostly empty. Truckers and early commuters, and one woman in a cheap suit driving toward a life she had never lived before. The transition happened gradually, and then all at once. The Bronx gave way to Westchester. Apartment buildings became houses. Houses became estates, fences became walls, and walls became iron gates with security cameras that tracked her car as it passed. She turned onto a private road lined with maple trees so thick they blocked the sky. The GPS said she had arrived, but the driveway alone took another 2 minutes to drive. Then the house appeared. It was not a house, it was a statement. Stone and glass and manicured grounds that stretched in every direction like the property had no intention of ever ending. Kiara had seen military bases smaller than this front lawn. She parked her Honda between a black Escalade and a silver Mercedes and sat in the car for exactly 10 seconds. She did not do this because she was nervous. She did it because Deshaun had written in the notebook, always arrive 2 minutes early. Spend the first minute observing. Spend the second minute breathing. She observed. She breathed. Then she got out. The security team was already assembled inside the main entrance. 11 men. All standing. All watching her walk through the door. Reginald Holt stepped forward first. He was 45. Former FBI. The kind of man who ironed his tactical vest. His posture was so straight it looked like a medical condition. His handshake was brief and purely professional. I am Reginald Holt, head of operations. Deshaun vouched for you. That is the only reason you are here. Do not make me regret it. Kiara met his eyes. Yes, sir. The rest of the team introduced themselves. Some shook her hand firmly, some barely touched her fingers. One man, tall, blonde, built like a linebacker, looked her up and down the way you look at a parking ticket. Annoying but not worth your time. He did not introduce himself at all. Nobody said a word about her being a woman. Nobody had to. The silence said it louder than words ever could. It was the same silence she had walked into at Fort Leonard Wood 14 years ago, when she was one of 3 women in a class of 42. The silence that says we will see. Reginald led her through the house to Lamar's study. He knocked once, opened the door, stepped aside. Lamar Jackson was standing by the window. He turned when Kiara entered. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he is trying to decide about. Not hostile, not dismissive, just measuring. 10 seconds passed. Neither of them spoke. Then Lamar said, "Deshaun says you are the best he has ever seen. I trust Deshaun with my life, so I will trust you. But trust is earned every day. Today is day 1. Yes, sir. I understand." Good. He turned back to the window. "Reginald will walk you through the protocols. I have a speaking engagement in Manhattan this afternoon. You will be on point." Kiara's chest tightened for a fraction of a second. On point, first day. A public event. Hundreds of people. She remembered her first assignment in Kandahar. The same tightness, the same voices in the back of her head saying, "You are not ready." She had been ready then. She was ready now. "Yes, sir," she said again, and she meant it with everything she had. Kiara had 8 hours to prove herself. She only needed 90 seconds, but those 90 seconds almost killed her. The morning unfolded with the kind of precision that comes from a system built over decades. At 6:30, Lamar was in the home gym. Kiara stationed herself outside the door. Through the glass, she could see him on the rowing machine. Steady rhythm, controlled breathing. The discipline of a man who had been taking care of his body the same way he took care of his business, methodically, without shortcuts. At 7:15, Lamar walked into the kitchen, and this was the detail that surprised Kiara. He cooked his own breakfast. No chef, no staff hovering with trays. Lamar Jackson, worth $11 billion, stood at a marble countertop and scrambled 3 eggs in a cast-iron skillet that looked like it had been with him longer than the money had. Kiara stood at the kitchen entrance, maintaining sightline, and watched a billionaire butter his own toast. At 8, he was in the study for a video conference with his board of directors. Kiara could hear fragments through the door. Talk of quarterly projections, a new solar installation in Nevada, and a brief tense exchange about the Vantage Energy acquisition offer. Someone on the call said the words "hostile takeover," and Lamar's voice went quiet in the way that quiet people go quiet when they are angry. Not louder, harder. While Lamar was in his meeting, Kiara did what she had been trained to do. She pulled up the afternoon logistics. Lamar was scheduled to speak at 3 o'clock at the National Clean Energy Conference at the Grand Hyatt in Midtown Manhattan. 600 attendees. Open registration. Multiple entry points. The kind of event that made protection details sweat. Kiara opened her laptop at the dining table and went to work. She pulled up the floor plan of the hotel, identified 4 exits, mapped 3 driving routes from Greenwich to Midtown, including a backup that ran through side streets in case of traffic or obstruction. She located the 2 nearest Level 1 trauma centers. She noted the NYPD precinct closest to the venue and made a mental note to call ahead and confirm their event coordination protocols. This is what executive protection actually looks like. Not sunglasses and earpieces, not standing behind someone looking intimidating. It is advance work. It is studying a building before you ever set foot inside it. It is knowing where every door leads. It is having a plan for the thing you hope never happens, and a backup plan for when the first plan fails, and a third plan for when both fail at once. Kiara had done this 100 times in Afghanistan. Different buildings, different threats, same discipline. She pulled up the morning security briefing that Reginald's team had compiled. Most of it was routine. Weather forecast, traffic advisories, staffing assignments for the afternoon. Then one line caught her eye. Increased online chatter regarding Vantage Energy acquisition. Threat level assessment. Moderate. Kiara found Reginald in the security office down the hall. "This Vantage Energy Threat Assessment," she said. "Moderate. What does that mean specifically?" What kind of chatter? Reginald barely looked up from his screen. Online forums, social media. People upset about the acquisition fight. Nothing actionable. Nothing specific. Has anyone cross-referenced the chatter with known threat actors? Has anyone done a deep dive on the attendee registration list for the conference? Reginald looked up now. Slowly. Moderate threats are background noise. If I shut down operations for every moderate threat, Lamar would never leave this house. We have protocols. We follow them. You are welcome to review the briefing in full, but I would suggest you spend your first day learning how we do things here before you start suggesting we do them differently. Kiara wanted to push back. Every instinct in her body told her that moderate was a word people used when they did not want to be responsible for canceling something important. But she was new. She had no standing. She had no proof. Just a feeling in her gut that she had learned to trust in Kandahar, but that nobody here had any reason to trust yet. She went back to the dining table and kept working on the route plan. At noon she stepped outside to make a phone call. Amara picked up on the second ring. "Mama, how is it?" "Mama's doing great, baby. I will pick you up tonight, okay? Did you meet the billionaire? Is he nice?" Kiara laughed. "He makes his own eggs. So yeah, I think he is okay." "That is funny. Miss Odessa made me pancakes." Kiara smiled. She listened to her daughter talk about pancakes and cartoons and the cat she saw on the fire escape, and for 2 minutes the world was simple and good and exactly the right size. Then she hung up, and the world got complicated again. The drive from Greenwich to Manhattan took about an hour and 20 minutes. Kiara was behind the wheel. Reginald rode shotgun. Lamar sat in the back seat of the armored Escalade, reviewing notes for his speech on a tablet. For the first 40 minutes, nobody spoke. The only sound was the hum of the highway and the quiet tap of Lamar's finger on his screen. Then Lamar set the tablet down. "Deshaun told me you served in Afghanistan." Kiara glanced in the rearview mirror. "Yes, sir. 8 years. Military police, then close protection." "Close protection. You guarded VIPs, generals mostly, some diplomats, some intelligence personnel." Lamar was quiet for a moment. Then he asked a question that had nothing to do with her resume. What was it like, being a woman in that world? Kiara kept her eyes on the road. Her grip on the steering wheel stayed steady. "Women make up about 17% of the military now," she said. "When I joined, it was closer to 14. People had opinions about whether we could handle it. We handled it." "And coming back," Lamar asked, "was that harder than going over?" This time Kiara did not answer right away. The silence lasted long enough that Reginald shifted in his seat. "The war does not end when you get on the plane home," Kiara said finally. "It follows you, into your sleep, into your relationships, into your ability to sit in a restaurant without checking every exit and counting every person between you and the door." She paused. "I still do that. Every time I sit down somewhere, I count the exits. My daughter thinks it is a game. She does not know it is the only way I can eat a meal in public without my hands shaking. Every year, thousands of American veterans come home to a country that calls them heroes and then forgets about them. The unemployment rate among veterans is higher than the national average. For women veterans, it is worse. Female veterans are 2.5 times more likely to take their own lives than civilian women, and many of them, like Kiara, carry world-class tactical skills that the private sector refuses to recognize because the experience did not come from a corporate training program. Lamar listened to all of this without interrupting. When Kiara finished, he was quiet for a long time. Reginald stared out the passenger window like he was trying not to be in the car. "My father was a veteran," Lamar said. "Korea, he never talked about it. Not once. He just came home and worked 2 jobs and never slept. My mother used to say that the man who went to war was not the same man who came back, but she loved both of them." Something shifted in the car. Not dramatically, not with music swelling or a camera zooming in, just a small, quiet rearrangement of the air between 2 people who had found something they shared. Not money, not status, not a job title, something older. the understanding of what it costs to serve, and what it costs to come home, and how those costs get paid by people who never asked for the bill. Kiara merged onto the FDR Drive heading south toward Midtown. Through the windshield, the Manhattan skyline climbed into view. Glass and steel and the kind of wealth that most people only ever see from the outside. She checked the rearview mirror one more time. Lamar was looking at her now. Not with suspicion, not with the measuring gaze from that morning, with something that looked like the beginning of respect. They had 45 minutes until the conference. Kiara switched back into operational mode. She confirmed the route, checked her earpiece, scanned the road ahead, but something had changed between them. And in a few hours that change would be the difference between life and death. The Grand Hyatt in Midtown Manhattan was buzzing. 600 people packed into a ballroom that smelled like fresh carpet and expensive cologne, CEOs in tailored suits, investors checking their phones between handshakes, journalists with press badges and recorders, environmental activists in blazers they clearly did not wear often. And at the center of it all, a stage with a single podium and a screen that read National Clean Energy Conference. Kiara had arrived 90 minutes before the event. She had walked the entire venue twice, counted the exits. 4 main doors, 2 service entrances, 1 loading dock in the back. She had noted the positions of hotel security checked in with the NYPD liaison assigned to the event and identified 3 spots in the ballroom where the sightlines converged on the podium. She chose her position stage left, close enough to reach Lamar in 4 seconds, far enough back to scan the entire room without turning her head. Reginald's team was spread across the venue. 2 men at the main entrance, 2 at the rear, 1 in the balcony, the rest positioned around the perimeter of the ballroom floor. Standard formation, by the book. Lamar took the stage at 3 o'clock. He spoke the way he did everything, direct, unhurried, with the quiet authority of a man who had spent his life proving people wrong and no longer needed their approval to keep doing it. He talked about the future of energy, about solar farms in places that used to mine coal, about battery technology that could power a city block for a week, about the thousands of jobs his company had created in communities that the fossil fuel industry had abandoned. And then he said something that made the room go very still. I was offered $2.4 billion to sell my company to Vantage Energy. I said no. They came back with $3.1 billion. I said no again. They sent lawyers, they sent lobbyists, they sent people who smile at you in boardrooms and threaten you in parking garages, and I am still saying no, because clean energy is not for sale. The future of this planet is not for sale, and I am certainly not for sale. The room erupted. Standing ovation. 600 people on their feet clapping and cheering for a man who had just publicly declared war on one of the most powerful corporate interests in the world. Kiara did not clap. She was watching the room. She scanned left to right, methodically, the way Deshawn's notebook had taught her, not looking for the obvious, looking for the almost. And she found it. Row 12, seat 7, a man in a gray suit. He was not clapping. Everyone around him was on their feet applauding, and this man was sitting perfectly still. His left hand rested on his knee. His right hand was inside his jacket, not moving, just resting there against his chest in a position that could mean he was scratching his ribs or adjusting his shirt or reaching for something that did not belong in a conference ballroom. Nobody else noticed. Why would they? He looked ordinary. Average height, average build, forgettable face, the kind of person you pass on the subway and never think about again. But Kiara had spent 8 years learning to see what ordinary looked like when it was hiding something extraordinary. In Afghanistan, the threat never looked like a threat. The threat looked like a man sitting still when everyone else was moving. She pressed her earpiece. Row 12, seat 7, gray suit. Something is off. His right hand has been inside his jacket for the past 3 minutes. He is not reacting to anything happening on stage. Reginald's voice came back. Flat, unimpressed. I see him. He is probably just uncomfortable. Stay in your position. "I would like to move closer to the stage," Kiara said. "Just as a precaution." "Negative. Stay in your position. You are new. Follow protocol." Kiara's jaw tightened. She wanted to argue. Every nerve in her body was telling her that something was wrong. Not a theory, not a guess. The same bone-deep certainty she had felt in Kandahar the day before the IED. The feeling that the air had changed. That the rhythm of the room had a wrong note in it that only she could hear. But she was 6 hours into her first day. She had no authority to override the head of operations. She had no proof. Just instinct. And instinct does not outrank chain of command. She stayed in position. But her eyes did not move from the man in the gray suit. Lamar finished his speech. The applause was thunderous. He stepped down from the podium and moved toward the crowd. People surged forward, hands reaching out, business cards appearing. Everyone wanted a piece of Lamar Jackson. And in row 12, the man in the gray suit stood up. Kiara saw it before anyone else. She had 47 seconds to decide. And in the world of executive protection, 47 seconds is either a lifetime or not nearly enough. This is the moment everything changes. If you are not subscribed, do it now, because what happens in the next 60 seconds will stay with you long after this video ends. The man in the gray suit was moving. Not fast, not slow. The steady, deliberate pace of someone who has already decided what he is going to do and is no longer thinking about whether to do it. He stepped into the aisle, turned left toward the front of the ballroom. His right hand was still inside his jacket. Kiara counted the distance. 15 meters between her and Lamar. 8 meters between the gray suit and Lamar. The math was simple. The math was terrible. He was closer. She left her position. She did not radio Reginald. She did not ask permission. There was no time for chain of command. There was no time for protocol. There was only the thing her body knew how to do before her mind could finish the sentence. She moved through the crowd, not running. Not yet. Moving fast but controlled, slipping between people, the way she had learned to move through crowded marketplaces in Kabul, where a wrong step could trigger a wire. Her eyes were locked on the man's right hand. 5 seconds passed. The man was 10 meters from Lamar now. Lamar was shaking hands with a woman in a green blazer, smiling, unaware. The crowd pressed in around him like a cocoon of admiration, and none of them knew what was walking toward them. 10 seconds. Kiara was weaving faster now. She bumped a shoulder. Someone spilled a drink. She did not look back. Her hand was already reaching for her earpiece. 15 seconds. The man's right hand came out of his jacket, and in his hand was a gun. A compact, semi-automatic, black. The overhead lights caught the metal for a fraction of a second, and it flashed like a signal nobody was supposed to see. The room was still clapping, still talking, still living in the world where nothing bad was happening. The distance between normal and catastrophe was measured in the time it takes a finger to move half an inch. 20 seconds. Kiara broke into a full sprint. "Gun, get down." Her voice was not a request. It was not a warning. It was the voice that had been trained at Fort Leonard Wood and tested in Kandahar province and sharpened by 8 years of standing between danger and the people she was supposed to protect. It cut through the noise of 600 people like a blade through paper. The crowd fractured, screams, bodies dropping, chairs crashing. But the man in the gray suit did not drop. He raised the gun, both hands now, arms extended, aimed directly at Lamar Jackson from 5 meters away. Kiara was still 7 meters from Lamar. She could not reach him in time. She could not push him down. She could not get between the barrel and the target. Except she could. If she stopped trying to reach Lamar and started trying to reach the bullet. 35 seconds. She changed direction. She was no longer running toward Lamar. She was running toward the line between the gun and the man it was pointed at. Running toward the space where the bullet would travel. 40 seconds. In her mind a flash, not a thought, an image. Amara's face. Amara at the kitchen table eating cereal. Amara saying, "Mama, you promised you would come home." Her legs did not stop. Her body had made the decision before her heart could override it. The instinct to protect was louder than the instinct to survive. It had always been louder. Since the day she became a mother. 45 seconds. She was in the line of fire now, between Clayton Mercer and Lamar Jackson. Her back to the gun, her chest facing the man she was paid to protect, her arms spreading wide like she could catch whatever came next. 47 seconds. The gun fired. The sound split the room in half. 1 second there was a conference, and the next second there was a war zone. People screaming, glass breaking somewhere, bodies hitting the floor. The bullet entered Kiara's right shoulder from behind. The same shoulder, the same side that carried the scar from Kandahar, the same place where her body had already learned what it meant to absorb something meant to destroy someone else. The impact spun her. She felt her feet leave the ground for a fraction of a second, felt the hot, wet burst of pain that was not quite pain yet because the adrenaline was still in control, felt her left hand reach for her right shoulder and come back red. She stumbled. She did not fall. Kiara Washington took a bullet through her shoulder, and she did not fall down. She turned. The man in the gray suit was still standing, still holding the gun, adjusting his aim for a second shot. His face was blank, not angry, not calm, the empty expression of a man who had already left the world behind and was operating on whatever was left. Kiara closed the distance in 2 steps. Her right arm was useless, hanging, leaking blood down her sleeve and onto the ballroom carpet, but her left hand was enough. She kicked the gun hand, not a wild swing, a precise trained strike to the inside of the wrist that she had practiced 10,000 times until the motion lived in her muscles like a reflex. The gun clattered to the floor. She grabbed his wrist with her left hand, twisted, rotated his arm behind his back, drove her knee into the back of his legs. He collapsed. She followed him down, pinned him with her knee on his spine. Her blood dripped onto his gray jacket in small, steady drops. Weapon secured. Shooter restrained. "I need medical." Her voice was flat, steady. The voice of a professional finishing a job. Reginald and 3 members of the security team arrived 6 seconds later. They took control of the shooter. Someone was shouting for paramedics. Someone else was clearing the room. The 600 people who had been applauding 90 seconds ago were now screaming, crying, running, crawling under chairs. And then Kiara let go, not of the shooter, of herself. She let go of the thing that had been holding her together since the gun fired. The training, the discipline, the iron refusal to acknowledge that a bullet had just passed through her body. The pain hit her like a wall. White hot, total, the kind of pain that turns the world sideways and makes the floor look like a ceiling. Her vision blurred. The sounds around her became muffled, like someone had wrapped the room in cotton. She felt herself leaning, felt her balance give way, felt someone's hands catch her under the arms before she hit the ground. Lamar Jackson was standing 2 meters away, not a scratch on him, not a drop of blood on his suit. He was alive because a woman he had met 9 hours ago had decided that his life was worth more than her safety. He looked at Kiara with an expression she would never forget. It was the face of a man watching someone do something he did not believe was possible. Terror and gratitude and awe and guilt all tangled together in the eyes of a billionaire who had just learned what it looked like when someone cared enough to bleed for you. Kiara Washington had been on the job for 6 hours and 47 minutes, and she had already given more of herself than most people give in a lifetime. The bullet had passed clean through the soft tissue of her right shoulder. No shattered bone, no severed artery. Through and through, the surgeon called it. The best possible outcome for a gunshot wound, which is a sentence that only makes sense in a world where getting shot can be categorized as lucky. Kiara was in a recovery room at Bellevue Hospital by 8 o'clock that evening. Her shoulder was stitched, bandaged, and immobilized in a sling. The pain medication made the edges of the world soft and slightly unreal, like looking at everything through a window that needed cleaning. She was staring at the ceiling when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Small footsteps, moving fast. The sound of shoes that were too big for the feet wearing them slapping against linoleum. Then the door burst open, and Amara was there. 7 years old, braids coming loose, eyes red and swollen, wearing the same clothes she had been wearing that morning when Kiara had kissed her forehead and said, "I am coming home tonight." Mama Amara ran to the bed and stopped, just short of jumping onto it, because Odessa, who was right behind her, grabbed the back of her jacket. "Careful, baby. Your mama is hurt. Be gentle." But Amara was already crying. Not the crying of a child who skinned a knee. The deep, terrified crying of a little girl who had spent the last 4 hours not knowing if her mother was alive. "You said you would come home tonight. You promised. You promised me." Kiara reached out with her left arm, the only arm that worked. She pulled Amara close and held her against her chest, feeling her daughter's small body shake with sobs, feeling the heat of her tears through the hospital gown. "I am here, baby. I am right here. I am not going anywhere." She said it over and over. The way you say things to children when the words are not really for them, they are for you. They are the prayer you make to whatever is listening, that you will be able to keep the promise you just made. Odessa stood in the doorway, one hand over her mouth, the other pressed against the doorframe, like she needed it to hold her up. She did not say anything. There was nothing to say. Kiara held her daughter and breathed. In, out. The weight of Amara's body against her chest, the smell of her hair, the sound of her breathing slowing from panic to something that might eventually become calm. And in that quiet moment, Kiara thought about what Deshawn had said. A mother protecting someone is the most dangerous kind of protector. It was true. She had proved it today. But lying in a hospital bed with a hole in her shoulder and her daughter crying on her chest, Kiara asked the question that nobody else had asked. Who protects Amara when the protector is the one who gets hurt? It was not a question with a clean answer. It was the question that lives inside every parent who does dangerous work, every soldier, every firefighter, every police officer who kisses their child goodbye and walks into something that might not let them walk back. The math never balances. You cannot be both the shield and the sheltered. You can only choose again and again which kind of love gets to win today. Lamar Jackson arrived at the hospital 40 minutes later. He stood in the doorway of Kiara's room. He did not knock. He did not announce himself. He just stood there watching a woman hold her daughter, and something inside him that had been frozen for a very long time began to crack. Amara had fallen asleep on Kiara's chest. Her small hand was curled around a fistful of the hospital blanket. Her breathing was steady now, the kind of breathing that only happens when a child feels safe enough to let go. Lamar looked at that small hand and thought about another small hand. 25 years ago, a boy named Kendrick, who used to fall asleep on his father's chest the same way. A boy who grew up in a house that got bigger and bigger, while the family inside it got smaller and smaller. He stepped back from the doorway. He walked down the corridor. He stopped at a window overlooking the East River and took out his phone. He dialed a number he had not called in 4 months. It rang 3 times. "Dad, hey son, He stopped, swallowed, started again. "I just wanted to hear your voice. Can I see you soon?" A pause on the other end. Long enough to fill with everything that had gone wrong between them. Long enough to fill with everything that could still go right. "Yeah, Dad. I would like that." Lamar hung up. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass of the hospital window and closed his eyes. Kiara Washington had stopped a bullet that afternoon, but she had done something bigger than that without even knowing it. She had shown a man who had forgotten what family looked like the cost of looking away. But the bullet that changed Kiara's life was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of something none of them expected. The investigation moved quickly. Within 48 hours, law enforcement had a full picture of the man in the gray suit. His name was Clayton Mercer. He was 41 years old. He had been an environmental engineer at Vantage Energy for 15 years. He had a degree from Penn State, a house in rural Pennsylvania, 2 children, a wife named Sharon who had once described him as the kindest man she had ever met. For most of his career, Clayton had been exactly the kind of employee corporations love. quiet, dedicated. The first one in the office and the last to leave. He believed in his work. He believed that energy companies had a responsibility to the communities they operated in. He believed that doing the right thing would eventually be rewarded. Then he found the data. Internal reports that Vantage Energy had been dumping chemical byproducts from their refining operations into an unlined waste pit near a rural community in western Pennsylvania. A community where Clayton had grown up, where his parents still lived, where his children played in creeks that ran through fields that sat downstream from a facility that was poisoning the groundwater. Clayton reported it internally. He followed the chain of command. He filed the paperwork. He trusted the system. The system responded by destroying him. Vantage fired him for what they called performance issues. They blacklisted him in the industry. They filed a counter lawsuit claiming he had stolen proprietary data. His professional reputation was shredded. The legal fees ate through his savings in 6 months. Sharon filed for divorce. She got custody of the children because Clayton could no longer afford a lawyer to fight for them. He tried to find help. He went to the press. 2 reporters were interested, then their editors killed the stories. He went to regulators. The EPA opened an investigation, then quietly closed it. He went to his congressman. The congressman's office sent a form letter. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, Clayton Mercer's mind began to break. Not all at once, not like a switch being flipped, the way ice cracks on a lake, slowly, in patterns you cannot see from the surface until one day you step on it and go through. He stopped sleeping. He stopped eating. Regularly, he started spending entire days on the internet reading about corporate corruption and government complicity and the growing divide between the people who have everything and the people who have nothing. The rage built slowly. Without treatment, without anyone to talk to, without a safety net that might have caught him before he fell too far. And here is what matters. Clayton Mercer did not walk into that ballroom because he was evil. He walked in because every system that was supposed to help him had failed. The company that should have protected its workers had fired him for telling the truth. The legal system that should have delivered justice had bankrupted him instead. The mental health system that should have caught his dissent had no bed for him and no appointment available for 3 months. By the time Clayton pointed a gun at Lamar Jackson, he was no longer capable of distinguishing between the man who was fighting Vantage Energy and the billionaire class that he believed had stolen his life. In his broken mind, all rich men were the same. All of them were complicit. All of them deserved what was coming. None of that excuses what he did. A bullet does not care about the biography of the person who fires it. Clayton Mercer tried to kill a man. He nearly killed a woman who had a 7-year-old daughter. There is no justification for that, but there is an explanation, and explanations matter. Not because they forgive, because they show us where the cracks are, where the system failed, where a different intervention at a different moment might have changed the ending. Kiara heard the full story from a detective who visited her hospital room 2 days after the shooting. She listened without interrupting. When the detective finished, the room was quiet. He was not a monster, Kiara said finally. He was a man who ran out of options and ran out of people to turn to. That does not excuse what he did, but it explains it. And explanations matter because they show us where the system broke. The detective looked at her for a long moment. Most people who take a bullet want vengeance. Kiara Washington wanted understanding. You won't believe what happens next. This story is about to take a turn that no one saw coming. Stay subscribed. 1 week after the shooting, Lamar Jackson drove to the Bronx. He did not send a driver. He did not take the armored Escalade. He got behind the wheel of a car himself and drove from Greenwich, Connecticut, to a neighborhood he had not visited in decades. And when he turned off the highway and started navigating the side streets, passing bodegas and laundromats and bus stops where people waited in the cold, he felt something shift inside him. Not discomfort. Recognition. He had grown up in a place like this. South Side Chicago smelled different than the Bronx, but it sounded the same. The same rhythms. The same resilience. The same quiet refusal to quit. He parked on a street with double-parked cars and a fire hydrant nobody was obeying. He walked up 4 flights of stairs because the elevator was still broken. He knocked on the door of apartment 409. The door opened, and Amara was standing there grinning so wide it looked like her face might split. "Mr. Lamar, Mama said you would come." She grabbed his hand and pulled him inside. The apartment was exactly as small as Lamar expected. One room that served as bedroom, living room, and kitchen, a fold-out bed against the wall, a refrigerator that hummed too loudly, a bathroom door that did not quite close all the way. But it was clean. It was organized. There were drawings taped to the wall in crayon, a small bookshelf stuffed with children's books, a pair of Amara's shoes lined up neatly by the door. And on the couch, Kiara, her right arm in a sling folding laundry, one-handed with the stubborn efficiency of a woman who did not believe in sitting still just because she had been shot. "You did not have to come all the way out here," she said. "I know," Lamar said. He stood in the middle of the room. He looked around. Not with pity, with attention. The way you look at something when you are trying to see it honestly. "My penthouse has 22 rooms," he said quietly. "Yours has 1. But this room has more life in it than my entire house." Kiara did not respond. She just kept folding. Lamar sat down on the chair by the kitchen table. Amara climbed onto his lap without asking, which startled him for a second before he let it happen. She showed him a drawing she had made of a woman in a black suit punching a bad guy. The woman had a cape. "That is you, Mama," Amara announced. "You are a superhero now." Kiara smiled. "Superheroes do not get shot, baby. The good ones do," Lamar said quietly. Kiara stopped folding. She looked at him. And then Lamar said something he had not said out loud to anyone in years. "I lost my wife 5 years ago. Cancer. I thought if I kept building, kept working, kept making the company bigger, the grief would get smaller. It did not. It just got quieter. And I let it get so quiet that I forgot it was still there. I forgot to call my son. I forgot to go to London. I forgot to do the only thing Gloria asked me to do before she died. She said, 'Do not let success make you lonely, Lamar.' And that is exactly what I did. I built walls made of money and called them success. And by the time I looked up, everyone I loved was on the other side." The room was still. Amara had stopped talking. Even at 7 she could feel the weight of what was being said. Kiara spoke carefully. "It is not too late, sir. Your son is still alive. That is more than a lot of people have." Lamar nodded. Slowly, the way a man nods when he is hearing something he already knows but needed someone else to say. He reached into his jacket and took out a folded piece of paper. "I came here to talk to you about 3 things. First, when you are healed, I want you back. Not as a consultant, as head of personal security. You earned that title. It is not charity. It is not gratitude. It is the job, and you are the person for it." Kiara opened her mouth. Lamar held up his hand. "Second, I am establishing a foundation. The Second Shield Foundation. It will fund job placement training and transition support for veterans entering the private security industry, especially women veterans. Because what happened to you, the 3 years of rejection letters, the doors that would not open, that should not happen to anyone who served this country." He paused. "Third, I am flying to London this weekend to see my son, because a woman I met 9 days ago reminded me that the people standing right in front of you are the ones who matter most." Kiara looked at the paper, then at Lamar, then at Amara, who was drawing another picture. This one had 2 superheroes, one big, one small. "You do not owe me anything," Kiara said. "I know," Lamar said. "That is why it matters." He stood up. Amara hugged his leg. He placed his hand on her head for a moment. Then he walked to the door. He turned back one more time. "Deshaun was right about you," he said. "He told me you would change things. I thought he meant the security protocols." He smiled. The first real smile Kiara had seen from him. He meant everything. Kiara did not just stop a bullet. She stopped a man from losing himself completely. 6 months later, Kiara Washington walked through the front doors of the Greenwich estate at 5:45 in the morning. Same time she always arrived, same black suit, same sharp eyes scanning every corner before her body fully entered the building. But everything else had changed. The 12-person security team that had once looked at her with silence and skepticism now reported directly to her, Kiara Washington, head of personal security. The title was printed on her office door, on her business cards, and on the organizational chart that hung in the security operations room. She had earned every letter of it. In the months since the shooting, Kiara had rebuilt the entire security operation from the ground up. She replaced the old reactive protocols with a system built on behavioral threat assessment, the same methodology the military had taught her in Afghanistan. Her team no longer waited for danger to announce itself. They learned to see it before it arrived. They studied body language. They analyzed crowd patterns. They practiced reading the room the way Deshawn had described, like musicians, feeling a song go off-key. Reginald Holt was still on the team. He had requested to stay. And if you asked him about Kiara, his answer was always the same. I have worked with a lot of operators in my career. She is one of the best I have ever seen. And I am not just saying that because she took a bullet. I am saying it because of what she did after. The Second Shield Foundation had launched 3 months after the shooting. Lamar funded it. Kiara shaped it. The mission was simple: help veterans, especially women veterans, transition into careers in private security and executive protection. Not charity. Training, mentorship, job placement, real opportunity. In its first 6 months, the foundation had helped over 200 veterans find positions in the industry. Women who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan and come home to the same rejection letters Kiara had faced. Women who could clear a room in 4 seconds but could not get past a hiring manager who saw their resume and thought no commercial experience. Kiara was the face of the foundation, not because she wanted to be, because she understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people see themselves in your story. Amara was thriving. She had started at a new school in the fall. Lamar had established a scholarship fund, but Kiara had insisted on one condition. The scholarship was merit-based. Amara had to earn it with her grades. Not because Kiara was proud, because she wanted her daughter to know that the things worth having are the things you work for. Amara's teacher sent a note home in November. It said, "Amara told the class today that her mother is a superhero who does not wear a cape. She said the cape would get in the way." Kiara pinned the note to the refrigerator, next to Amara's drawing of the 2 superheroes. One big, one small. In London, a plane landed at JFK on a Saturday afternoon. Kendrick Jackson walked through the arrivals gate, carrying one bag and wearing the expression of a man who was not sure what he was walking into. Lamar was waiting at the bottom of the escalator. He had not seen his son in 3 years. He had rehearsed what he would say. Something about being sorry. Something about time lost. Something about doing better. He did not say any of it. When Kendrick reached the bottom of the escalator, Lamar pulled him into a hug so tight that neither of them could speak. They stood there in the middle of JFK while travelers streamed around them like water around a stone, and for the first time in longer than either could remember, the distance between them was measured in inches instead of oceans. 1 week after Kendrick's visit, a package arrived at Kiara's office. Brown paper, no return address. Inside was a leather notebook, worn at the edges. Pages filled with 30 years of handwriting she recognized. Deshawn had mailed it back. She opened to the last page. Below the final entry she had read months ago in a diner on Grand Concourse, there was a new line, written in Deshawn's careful hand. "I knew you would add a chapter." Kiara closed the notebook, held it against her chest for a moment. Then she placed it in her desk drawer next to the photograph of Darnell and the drawing Amara had made on her first day. She had added a chapter. But the book was not finished yet. 1 year after the shooting, Kiara stood backstage at a conference center in Washington, D.C. The event was called Women in Security and Defense. 500 people in the audience, military leaders, corporate executives, policymakers, veterans. She was wearing a suit that cost more than $42 this time, but she still checked the exits before she checked her notes. She called Amara from the green room. "Mama, are you nervous?" "A little bit, baby. Just pretend everybody is eating cereal." "That is what I do when I have to read in front of class." Kiara laughed. That is the best advice anyone has given me today." She hung up. She smoothed her jacket. She felt the scar on her right shoulder pull slightly under the fabric the way it always did when she moved a certain way. A reminder, not of pain, of purpose. She walked onto the stage. The lights were bright. The audience was a sea of faces. And for one breath, she was standing in a studio apartment in the Bronx, ironing a black suit, wondering if she was enough. Then she spoke. "I am not standing here because I stopped a bullet. I am standing here because someone gave me a chance when nobody else would. Deshaun Carter saw something in me that I had stopped seeing in myself. And that is all most of us need. Not charity, not pity, just someone who looks at us and says, 'I see you. I trust you. Now show me what you can do.'" The applause was long. Kiara stood at the podium and let it wash over her. Not because she needed it, because the women in the audience needed to hear that sound directed at someone who looked like them. Afterward, she was standing in the lobby, signing programs and shaking hands when a young woman approached. She was 22, short hair, strong posture, the kind of controlled stillness that comes from military training. She was holding a baby on one hip and trying not to cry. "Miss Washington, She paused, swallowed, tried again. "I am trying to get into executive protection. I did 4 years in the Marines. But everyone keeps telling me I am not the right fit. Too young. Single mom, no commercial experience." I was about to give up. Kiara looked at her, really looked, and she saw it, the same exhaustion she had carried for 3 years, the same stubborn refusal to quit, the same fire that burned behind eyes that the world had tried to make invisible. "What is your name?" "Destiny. Destiny Coleman." Kiara smiled. "Destiny. That is a powerful name." She reached into her bag and pulled out a leather notebook, brown, worn soft at the edges, pages thick with 30 years of handwriting and 6 months of her own. "Here is what I need you to do. Do not give up. Come to my office on Monday. I have a position that might be right for you. But first, read this. Then add your own chapter." Destiny took the notebook with her free hand. Her eyes were red. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you, Miss Washington. Call me Kiara. And thank Deshaun. He started this chain. We just keep it going." Destiny walked away, the notebook in one hand, her daughter on her hip, walking toward a Monday that might change everything. Kiara watched her go, and she thought about Deshaun sitting in that diner, about his hand on the notebook, about the 3 rules, about the thing that was not written down. You protect someone because you care. Some people stop bullets. Some people start chains. Kiara Washington did both. Thank you for following Kiara's incredible journey from a studio apartment in the Bronx to a stage in Washington, D.C. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently about who deserves a chance, please subscribe to this channel and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. You do not need a title to protect someone. You do not need a fortune to change a life. You just need to show up, even when the world says you are not enough, especially when the world says you are not enough. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this one. And leave a comment telling us who gave you a chance when nobody else would. Tell us their name. They deserve to be heard. Now, before I go, I want to step outside the story for a moment and talk to you directly. This story is a work of fiction. The names, characters, places, and events are entirely imaginary. Any resemblance to real people living or dead is purely coincidental. But the issues in this story are very real. I wrote this because I kept reading about female veterans who cannot find jobs, women who served their country, who risked their lives overseas and came home to rejection letters and closed doors. That stuck with me. It made me angry. And anger, when you point it in the right direction, becomes a story. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, female veterans face higher unemployment rates than their male counterparts. And according to the VA, women, veterans are 2.5 times more likely to die by suicide than civilian women. These are not characters. These are real people, and most of them never make the news. If you know a veteran male or female, check in on them. Not because they are broken, because they deserve to know that somebody remembers what they gave. Thank you for spending this time with me. Every story I tell, I try to put something real in it, something that makes us think, not just feel. I hope this one did that for you. Until next time, stay kind, stay brave, and remember, the people the world overlooks are often the ones holding it together.